The wind howled across the Wyoming plains like a mournful coyote, rattling the chinking in the log walls of the small frontier cabin. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine smoke from the dying fire and the faint, metallic tang of illness that no amount of sage or willow bark tea could mask. Eliza Harlan lay on the narrow rope bed, her once sturdy frame reduced to a fragile outline beneath the patchwork quilt she'd sewn herself in better days. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin pale as fresh snow, and her breathing came in shallow rasps that echoed in the quiet room. Thomas Harlan, her husband of 23 years, sat on a three-legged stool beside her, his calloused hands gently holding one of hers. He was a big man, broad-shouldered from years of wrestling steers and breaking broncs on their modest ranch 10 miles outside of Dry Gulch. His face, weathered by sun and wind, was etched deeper now with lines of grief. Gray streaked his beard, and his eyes, usually sharp as a hawk's, were red-rimmed from sleepless nights. The doctor from town had come twice, shaking his head each time. Consumption, he called it. Nothing to be done but keep her comfortable till the end. Eliza's eyes fluttered open, the blue in them faded but still bright with the fire that had drawn Thomas to her all those years ago back in Missouri. Tom, she whispered, her voice barely louder than the crackle of the fire. Promise me, bury me proper. Up on the hill, under that old cottonwood. With the view of the mountains. Thomas swallowed hard, his throat tight. Hush now, Lizzie. You're gonna pull through this. Spring's comin', and you'll be out tendin' the garden again. She managed a weak smile, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had left. Don't lie to me, old man. I've seen enough death on this frontier to know when it's knockin'. Just promise. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Outside, the snow had started falling again, heavy flakes drifting past the single greased paper window. It was late winter, 1887, and the isolation of their ranch felt heavier than ever. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and town was a full day's ride in good weather. As the days blurred into one another, Eliza weakened further. She could no longer keep down broth or even water. Thomas tended her tirelessly, changing the linens, spooning herbal teas the old Shoshone woman from down the creek had brought, reading from the family Bible by lamplight. He barely ate himself, surviving on coffee and jerky. The cattle needed checking, but he hired a young hand from town to handle the herd, paying him double just to stay away from the cabin. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the snow-covered plains in shades of orange and pink, Eliza called him close. Tom, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've carried too long. He leaned in, brushing a strand of gray hair from her forehead. Anything, Lizzie. You know that. Her breath hitched, and she coughed weakly, a spot of blood staining her lips. Back in Missouri, before we married. I wasn't the innocent girl you thought. There was a man. A soldier. We had a child. A boy. I gave him up, to an orphanage in St. Louis. Said he died at birth. But he didn't. I couldn't bear the shame, not with my family watchin'. Thomas froze, his hand stilling on hers. The confession hung in the air like smoke. In the strict moral code of the frontier, such secrets could shatter lives. Unwed mothers were shunned, whispered about in church pews, branded forever. Why tell me now? He asked softly, no anger in his voice, only confusion. Because I need to go clean, she said, tears welling. And because, if there's any mercy in heaven, maybe you'll find him someday. Tell him his ma loved him, even if she was too scared to keep him. Thomas sat back, staring at the fire. The weight of it pressed on him. 23 years of marriage, building this life from nothing, homesteading the land, fighting off rustlers, surviving blizzards and droughts, and now this revelation in her final days. Part of him reeled, questioning everything he thought he knew. But looking at her frail form, he felt only love, fierce and protective. I forgive you, Lizzie, he said finally. Ain't nothing changes what we got. You're my wife, always. She wept then, quiet sobs that racked her body, and he held her until she drifted into fitful sleep. The next morning, Eliza slipped into a coma. Her breathing grew shallower, her skin cooled to the touch. Thomas knew the end was near. He sent the hired hand to town with a note for the preacher and the undertaker. Dry Gulch was a small place, a cluster of saloons, a general store, a church, and a handful of homes along a muddy main street. Folks there knew the Harlans, respected Thomas as a hard-working rancher, pitied Eliza's long illness. By afternoon, a few neighbors arrived on horseback, bundled against the cold. Mrs. Jenkins from the next ranch brought a pot of stew, though Thomas couldn't eat. The preacher, Reverend Hale, a stern man with a white beard, prayed over Eliza. "The Lord giveth and taketh away," he intoned. As night fell, Eliza's breaths grew farther apart. Thomas sat alone with her after the others left, holding her hand, whispering memories of their early days, the wagon train west, the first calf born on their land, the dances in town where she'd outshone every girl. At dawn, she took her last breath. Peaceful, like falling asleep. Thomas closed her eyes, kissed her forehead, and sat there numb until the sun rose high. The town expected a simple funeral. Bury her in the churchyard, like most folks. Reverend Hale had already prepared the plot. But Thomas had other plans. He washed and dressed Eliza in her best Sunday dress, the one with lace she'd saved for special occasions. He wrapped her in a clean sheet, then loaded her gently into the wagon. Instead of heading to town, he drove up the rugged trail to the hill behind their cabin, the one overlooking the ranch and the distant Tetons. There, under the sprawling cottonwood that shaded their picnics in summer, he dug the grave himself. The ground was frozen hard, requiring hours with pick and shovel. Sweat froze on his brow, his muscles screamed, but he worked through the day and into the next. Word spread fast in Dry Gulch. Riders saw the wagon tracks leading away from town. By evening, a group gathered at the saloon: the preacher, the sheriff, shopkeepers, other ranchers. "He's burying her on his own land," one said incredulously. "Against God's law," Reverend Hale thundered. "Bodies belong in consecrated ground. What if Indians dig her up? Or wolves? It's heathen." Murmurs grew. In those days, burying outside the churchyard was seen as denying the soul proper rest, inviting superstition. Some whispered Thomas had gone mad with grief. Others recalled Eliza's long seclusion. Maybe there was something shameful about her death. A posse formed, 10 men strong, riding out to the ranch under lantern light. They found Thomas finishing the grave, lowering the pine box he'd built himself. "Tom Harlan," the sheriff called. "You can't do this. Come to town now, we'll handle it proper." Thomas stood, shovel in hand, dirt-streaked and defiant. "She asked me to bury her here. This is her home. Our home. She wanted the view of the mountains she loved." The preacher dismounted, face red. "This is sacrilege. No Christian burial without the church." But Thomas didn't budge. "She confessed her sins to me. God's the only judge now. This hill's as holy as any plot you got, marked with stones and crosses." Arguments flew. Guns were drawn halfway, tensions high. The men circled, demanding he exhume her if need be. Then Thomas did what shocked them all. He dropped to his knees beside the open grave, pulled a small locket from his pocket, the one Eliza had worn, containing a faded photograph of a baby boy, and placed it in the coffin with her. "This is for our son," he said loudly, voice carrying on the wind. "The one she gave up long ago. She carried the guilt her whole life. Now she goes to meet him clean." Gasps rippled through the group. Secrets like that were buried deep in frontier society, unwed children, hidden pasts. Revealing it publicly. Unthinkable. It tarnished not just Eliza's memory, but Thomas's own standing. The preacher sputtered. You knew." "I knew," Thomas said, standing tall. "And I loved her anyway. More for her courage in tellin' me at the end. If that makes me a fool or her unworthy in your eyes, so be it. But she's stayin' here." Silence fell, broken only by the wind in the cottonwood branches. One by one, the men lowered their heads. The sheriff holstered his gun first. Even Reverend Hale, after a long moment, nodded grimly. They helped Thomas fill the grave. No one spoke against it again. In the weeks that followed, whispers flew through Dry Gulch. Some called Thomas a sinner for defying the church. Others saw his act, honoring her final wish, exposing the painful truth to protect her peace, as the deepest kind of devotion. He never attended services again, but folks tipped their hats when he rode into town for supplies. Thomas lived on the ranch another 30 years, tending the land alone. He planted wildflowers on that hill each spring, and on clear days, he'd sit under the cottonwood, gazing at the mountains, talking to Eliza as if she could hear. The town never forgot what the rancher did. It challenged their rigid ways, forced them to confront the hidden sorrows everyone carried across the vast, unforgiving frontier. And in time, a few others chose private burials on their own land, whispering thanks to the man who stood firm for love over convention.